what are the strategies that can assist teams to manage fatigue. And I think this is a great area of focus because there's lots of things that can be done in terms of supporting individuals who experience fatigue that's impacting their participation and ability to do the activities they really want to be able to do. So first step really that we always like to start with is understanding activity levels and how they impact fatigue. It's a really important part of fatigue management, and this boom-bust cycle is often a nice representation of what we can often see where an individual experiences fatigue. So down the left-hand side and the vertical axis of this graph is activity levels, with low activity levels being down the bottom and high activity levels being up the top. And along the horizontal axis at the bottom is time. So that can either be days or weeks. So this cycle might happen over days or it could happen over weeks, depending on the individual. And this cycle is particularly important in adolescents because it's a cycle we often see while they're working out what level of activity they can and can't manage. And that is particularly common sort of early in diagnosis, but also can happen at different points throughout their condition, even if they've been living with the condition for quite a while. So the blue depicts really this sort of pattern of activity that I'm talking about with what we see. So commonly what happens is the individual might be pushing themselves either to keep up with peers or to keep functioning at the same level that they've always been, or, if they're really high achieving and want to get lots and lots done, they push themselves. They might be ignoring some of those fatigue signs and their body telling them to stop. So they keep pushing, get to this peak where they're at really high levels of activity, and then they bust or sort of crash because they're so exhausted. They've pushed themselves too hard, and they get to this point where they're so exhausted that they can't manage typical levels of activity, and they really are at a point where they have to get to very, very low levels of activity to recover. And so then they have this period where they're sort of, stopping, not engaging in as much activity, needing to rest and recover. And then sometimes that can almost then trigger the cycle to restart because they might start having feelings of, oh, I'm so behind, I haven't done any of my schoolwork because I've been tired, I need to catch up, I need to get back on top of all of the things that I've missed and haven't done, and the cycle can restart. So in terms of that increase in activity, trying to catch up, and then the bust again. And so what really we prefer to see is a more steady line across that graph where they're working out what the just right level of activity is, and they're not having these big peaks and dips in their activity and function. And so that's what a lot of the strategies we'll talk about for the rest of the presentation are focused at, is how can we get kind of a steady line of activity and avoid this boom-bust cycle. I should comment that this is part of the process of really getting on top of and learning good fatigue management strategies. So often adolescents may have to go through this cycle a few times before they get to the point of kind of figuring out and seeing it for themselves. Another concept that we find particularly useful is this battery concept. So it involves thinking about your energy levels as being like an iPhone battery, and due to MS, the adolescent's battery may not charge as quickly or as fully as other peers their age, and it might also drain more quickly. And so we might talk about it in terms of thinking, how can we make your battery last for the whole day so that you can do the activities you want and need to do? And an analogy I might often use also in clinic is that if we're doing lots and lots of activity really close together, so we wake up in the morning and we're doing a lot of activity at the start of the day before we even get to school, our battery is going to drain much quicker than if we pace that activity across the day. So for example, if you're getting up and spending a couple of hours on your phone watching videos, going on social media, sending messages, emails, using it constantly, it's going to drain much more quickly than if we did little bits of activity throughout the day. It's more likely to last for the full day. And that's the general concept that we really try to apply to fatigue management strategies. And I guess the boom-bust cycle and this battery concept are a little bit of the base that we use to then inform the other strategies that we apply, and we'll talk about a lot more throughout the presentation. So it's really the next strategies are focused on trying to save or maximise that battery so that it can last the whole day and they're able to do the activities they want and need to do. Once we get a good understanding of activity levels and how it can impact fatigue through using that boom bust and the battery concept, the triple P strategy is a great one that we would often encourage to be used. So triple P stands for plan, prioritise and pace. Here's really an example of how you would apply that in a practical sense. So plan, I would suggest starting by writing a list of all of the activities that they want or need to get done in that week, and taking note also of thinking about when are my energy levels highest. Am I best in the mornings, or is my energy best at the middle of the day, or actually am I more of a night owl and my energy is best in the later afternoon or evening? The other part of the plan phase is getting a system that works for them. So setting up a diary or a calendar, can be a physical diary, could be a digital diary, whatever works best for that individual, but finding one system that they can consistently access and use and that works well is important. The second step is prioritising. So getting that list that they've written out of all of the tasks they want or need to do and looking at, is there any tasks that can be rescheduled or delegated? So what are the tasks that don't have to be done this week, and try and either reschedule or delegate to someone else to complete. That should then leave us with a list of tasks that must be done this week. So the really important tasks that we need to make sure we get to. I then get different coloured highlighters and go through that list of tasks that have to be done this week and colour code them based on energy demand. So that energy demand can be both cognitive demand as well as physical, so thinking about both. And thinking on each of those tasks, are they a low energy activity, so they don't need too much cognitive or physical energy, we colour code them green. Do they need moderate levels of energy? In that case, we colour code them yellow. Or are they a high energy activity, and we actually colour code those ones red? They use a lot of energy, either that cognitive or physical or both, and they're quite demanding. And this is really individualised. So an activity that might be high energy for one individual might be low energy for another. So it's really important that individual thinks about it in terms of their experience and what they find in terms of the energy demands. The last step of this process is pace, so looking at how we can pace activity. And often I would bring up that diary or calendar and have it for the full week and start as a first step to look at where are the blocks of time we can fit in some proactive rest breaks. So thinking about a sort of 10 to 30-minute rest period, and the frequency of this will really depend on the individual's fatigue. I would aim for sort of 2 to 3 times. If they're not too impacted by fatigue and they feel like they're managing with less, that is okay. It again needs to be individualised. Once we've got those rest breaks in, then we really want to look at those high energy tasks and try and schedule those in for when the individual's energy is at its best, it's at its highest. So if they've said I'm a morning person, that's when my energy is best, we'd be trying to look at those high energy tasks and saying, can we fit them in the mornings? The next step, once we've scheduled those in, is to look at, okay, can we try and schedule a green activity that's a low energy activity after those high energy activities? Ideally, we want to avoid having back-to-back high energy activities or red activities. Once we've done that step, we then look at the yellow activities and see if we can spread them around the gaps of where the red and green activities are. This approach really helps us in terms of, pacing activity and spreading it across both the individual's day as well as their week. So typically we would use that system in terms of thinking about the week and extracurricular activities or homework or social activities that they may need to fit in, but we have also used it nicely in terms of where maybe keeping up with the school routine was challenging in terms of attendance, the fatigue was impacting that. I have used it successfully in looking at the students' timetable and trying to map out what's happening in terms of their workload and subjects with those energy demands. So this is a nice example in that this individual's energy was best in the mornings, and we were finding that getting to school towards the end of the week was really challenging. And when we sort of mapped out the subjects in terms of energy demands, we could see towards that middle end of the week, there were 2 days where there were high energy demand activities that were right at the end of the day when their energy was lowest. And thankfully, this school was quite a large school. They had a lot of classes and subjects running at different times, which allowed us to flex the timetable and reschedule those 2 end of the week red maths classes to separate classes that ran earlier in the day and were a bit better suited to that individual's energy requirements. So that is not always an option, but there is usually ways in most schools that we are able to get involved around looking at ways if we can modify or adjust things a little bit to help with that fatigue management. And that is very much within the role of occupational therapy in the clinic and something that we're able to help support and advocate for. There's also other supports that we can link you in with through the clinic as well. Rest breaks we touched on about rescheduling those into the week proactively, and I think it's important to highlight that rest doesn't just equal sleep. So we know that restful activity is really any activity that sort of slows down the body and gives it time to rest and recover. That may look like engaging in low energy activities such as watching TV, reading, listening to music. And it can also be more restful activities such as meditation, deep breathing, relaxation exercises, mindfulness, yoga or Pilates or Tai Chi. It's really dependent on the individual, and I think that's something that's worth exploring, is what is considered restful activity for that individual and helps them to recharge. As mentioned, we like to schedule it proactively, so not waiting until you're really tired and really need the rest break, but rather scheduling it in so that the rest break's already blocked into the day and it's there proactively before you get into that point of exhaustion. And ideally aiming for about 2 to 4 restful periods of 10 to 30 minutes duration throughout the day. It's important to have a comfortable position, so if the rest breaks have been scheduled at school, that's also something we might explore with the school if there's a quiet area that the student can use away from other students. And ideally remaining seated, as lying down might lead to napping, and we'll talk about napping a little bit later on in the presentation. I've just got references there.